Welcome to LimaCharlie's Year in Review for 2022. We started this tradition at the end of last year and thought it was a valuable conversation, reflecting on what we did over the last 12 months and then looking forward to all that is coming. I appreciate everyone taking the time out of their busy day to be here with us. I know there are a lot of things competing for your attention, but we feel this is an important conversation and are very glad that you are here. If you have any questions during the talk, you can enter them into the chat window of whatever platform you are watching this from. Members from our team will try and answer the questions as they come in, and we will cover any that we didn't get to at the end or email you directly. We can start with a round of introductions. My name is Christopher Luft. I'm one of the co-founders here at LimaCharlie, and I'll be moderating the conversation.
I'll go. I'm Max, co-founder at LimaCharlie as well. Technical background and in security.
I'm Ross. I'm a head of product here over at LimaCharlie, a product guy.
Hey, I'm John. I like just leading the research of our company, and I'm responsible for the leading and directing the research of all our efforts to make the product as nice as possible.
Awesome. And hey, everyone, I'm Matt Bromley. I'm the lead solutions engineer over here, and I help make sure that LimaCharlie is the best possible fit for your organization.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. To kick things off, and for the benefit of anybody who is just learning about LimaCharlie, I'm going to ask our founder and CEO, Maxime Lemothe-Broussard, to give a high-level overview of LimaCharlie and what it is that we do.
Sure. LimaCharlie is a state of mind, really. It's so LimaCharlie is kind of a very new approach in security in a bunch of different ways. Fundamentally, what we put out in security is infrastructure. So they are systems to implement security solutions and security posture, whether it's in products or in enterprise. But the way that we do it is very different. So we kind of take this similar approach as AWS, meaning, we try to make everything fundamentally self-serve, scale up, scale down, build per usage, kind of all the characteristics that nowadays you don't really want to work with anything that isn't that. So that's the foundation of what we do. And then what we build on top of that is really kind of chunky capabilities that are needed in cybersecurity nowadays. So, things like, hey, I want to have some, EDR. That was kind of the first big capability we had. Bring in telemetry from different places and being able to do retroactive hunting through data sets. So all kinds of different things. And all of those are kind of accessible as infrastructure as code, DevOps. So that's really kind of the foundation of our approach. So we are different in a bunch of different ways. And we pretty strongly believe that that's the way that future cybersecurity is going to be.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Maxime. And as most of you probably know, we're a product-led company, which really influences the way that we think about what we are building and how we approach the market. Before we move on with the conversation portion of this roundtable, and to add a little more color to what Maxime was saying, I'm going to ask our head of product, Ross Haliuk, to briefly explain how we think about the way that we are building.
That's an awesome question, Chris. How do we think? So when I genuinely believe that deciding how to build product is equally or even more important than deciding what exactly we build. And so even today, most people and most companies in the industry do not have the easy way to try cybersecurity products, do not have the easy way to evaluate something before they buy it, and so on. So while I can get started with tools like Twilio or PagerDuty in a number of minutes, go on their website, see exactly what their pricing is going to look like, that is not the case for cybersecurity products, where most of us have to go through a number of different demos, meet mandatory minimums, and so on and so forth. So last year, given that this is the conversation about the 2022, last year we have put a lot of emphasis on our onboarding experience. And when I say onboarding, I don't mean hey, how do we optimize where people click in the web app? What I mean is, how do we make it easy for people to understand, what does LimaCharlie do? And because we do take a different approach to cybersecurity, there is a bit of an explanation and education that goes into there. We also we want to make it easy for people to understand how much does this going to cost for me. And on one hand, we have all the pricing available transparently on the website, but we've also built, in the 2022, we built a new pricing calculator. So anybody can just go on the pricing page and not only see the pricing, but quickly do the calculation and understand how much their specific deployment is going to cost. Last year, we've learned that many people discover new products and understand what they do when they see them in action. And so with that, we've added what we call a demo tenant configuration, something that makes it very easy for a new user to get started, to click easy in the UI to just say, hey, I would like to have a demo tenant onboarded to demo configuration. I would like to have a demo configuration applied to my tenant, which will then onboard a sensor, start bringing events and telemetry into their organization, apply detection and response rules, generate detections, and so on. So basically, when we think about product-led growth, what we really mean is make the product accessible, make the product available. And frankly, I'm proud to say that as of today, being accessible, it is what sets us apart. Having said that, my hope is that in the next couple of years, more and more cybersecurity companies will be embracing similar approach, where it doesn't have to be loudly stated as product-led growth. It doesn't have to be a specific strategy. None of that is what product-led growth is. Instead, we just have to understand that we as an industry benefit tremendously from having accessible security tooling. It means that students and the aspiring security professionals can learn new products before they get into the industry. It means that companies and security engineers, security architects can evaluate tools before they buy. It means that people who work full time can get started building their side businesses. So all of that stuff is what I believe is the future.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Ross. Yeah, value-based selling, I think, is the future as well. A big theme for the things that we worked on in 2022 was around solving problems for our customers. We're in a pretty tight loop with most of them, and it allows us to understand where their pain is so that we can engineer scalable solutions to solve those problems. I'll put it out to the group. What are the biggest things we heard from customers in 2022, and what solutions did we put in place to help address those issues?
Well, Matt,
there's a lot. No, I was going to say there's a lot, Chris. And I've only, to be fair to everyone who's watching this here, you didn't see my face last year. I joined in August, and already in those 3.5 months, it's already been a massive amount of changes that have taken place. I think there's a whole bunch that have either kind of been the result of ongoing development, and Max might have some thoughts on this one too. Some of them feel like we had an idea at LimaCharlie, and then a customer came along and said, hey, here's like the icing on the cake that would just drive this thing home or something. One of the best examples I can think of for that is I continue to be amazed at the rate of adoption of different telemetry sources. And Max, I'm happy to get your thoughts on this one too. But when I first came over here, one of the first things that really got me excited, especially as an incident responder and someone who's just dealt with data sets on data sets on data sets on data sets, like it's endless, is to be able to just pull everything into one place and have my data actually centralized, but then be also to, write rules on top of that, to be able to treat all my data as first-class objects, if you will. And I think on the surface, right, it's really easy to kind of visualize when I use those words, really straightforward, right? But it's very different for a customer to then come in and say, hey, it's great that you support these. Here's actually the fields that matter, or here's where we get the most value out of. Or, hey, can we maybe tweak the way that we bring this in order to, possibly find better time efficiency or better storage efficiency. So this is kind of like a behind the scenes thing that a lot of folks may not realize. But when you say, when it rolls off the tongue, like, oh yeah, we integrate with Microsoft Defender and this and that, right? That little phrase to a lot of folks just means, oh, cool, logs in one place. Great.
Mm-hmm.
But what's not necessarily being considered, or should I say what is maybe just assumed in the background, is like, well, how often do they get pulled in? What types of logs? What types of telemetry? Is it alerts? Is it actual events that are taking place? How verbose is it? What's my frequency? What's my storage capacity? What's the ingestion method? What are all the different ways to bring these in? And I think when you take that and multiply that by, 5, 10, 20 different external sources, you get to a place where you've really got to think about how to re-engineer bringing in all these different sources. And I'll be the first to say a huge hat tip to a lot of our customers this year who have said, hey, I need to get access to this source, with these time parameters or this level of importance or this level of severity and stuff. And that's one of my first things, Chris, that I think is kind of my, like, what have we done to help our customers? It's like, listen to how they can be most efficient, how we can help optimize data streams for them. And then, go and make that a possibility. And let's add even more icing to the cake, right? In LimaCharlie, it's like, it's a modal window with like 3 fields to fill in and you're done. Because it's not like a super complex background template you've got to manage or anything like that, right? We've abstracted away all of that and said, all right, what is the least friction we can introduce to make this thing as seamless as possible? Now, I can't speak for what it takes on the other side of that integration, but I can say on our side, it's very easy to integrate. So that's my first big one, is listening to customers about, hey, how do we get data more efficiently into here, and how do we have better integrations? I don't know, Max, if you've got anything to add to that one. Maybe I went on too far, gave away too much, but that's my first really, like, this is awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, the only thing I'll add to that, and you touched a little bit on it, is I really enjoy working with our users, and this kind of sets of capabilities is kind of the where many different rivers meet, like where everything just like is in the right spot. And it's meant that the way we've built it, how we've separated various parts of it, the flexibility, and the users on LimaCharlie has meant that there's been several cases actually where we would even do like a proof of concept with with somebody who's just heard about us and is kind of investigating, and they are saying like, oh yeah, we're using this this big product and we'd like to bring it in. And for us to be in the position to just say like, that's great, it's a well-known product, you can go, and if you want, you can do this yourself today. Like, you're always like able to onboard whatever you need. But you know what, this is a thing we also want to add in. So if you bring it in, we can then go and very quickly make it a first class source of telemetry. And now it really looks amazing. It's really, really streamlined. And to be able to go through that kind of whole life cycle in like 3-4 days, I feel is really been kind of something magical, because we're able to be the icing on the cake to the users. All the users kind of benefit from that. It's very cool.
Yeah, if I can add, Max and Matt, there is no way to describe this better. I mean, we are really normalizing cybersecurity data stream in a way that user can just tailor, detection, response capabilities, reaction, and whatever in a way that is absolutely handmade around the customer. That's beautiful. Again, I'm impressed. I'm just here as a part of this webinar, the discussion, but I'm also listening with the same emphasis of a guy that's learning from you guys. So that's incredible. I think this is one of our main features, that we are trying to normalize the information that the telemetry that come across whatever, and these things make us like not competing with anyone. We are just trying to facilitate the cybersecurity operation around. So that's my point of view, and that's amazing.
I think what excites me the most about what we're talking about here is the fact that whenever we build any sort of capability, and in this case, it's the ability to bring in the external logs and telemetry into the product, we make it like we build it in a generic way, meaning there are many products on the market, like LimaCharlie. Like LimaCharlie isn't the only way to bring all of your logs and telemetry into one place. There are many products on the market, and the reality is that for many of them, like you go on the website, you see like the list of logos. Okay, here are the integrations we support. And the moment you see the one that is in your environment, but is not on that list, you have to submit a ticket, and you have to hopefully wait for another like 3 to 6 months that before it gets built, assuming that enough other customers or potential customers will vote for it so that it gets prioritized and gets into the product people's hand. But then what's cool about the way we do it is we built it in such a generic way that, hey, if you want to bring in an entirely different type of logs tomorrow, like we don't even have to know about it. You can just go ahead and do it on your own.
Yeah, Max, do you want to quickly talk about the adapter, which is the open source project we've built to facilitate people bringing in their own data sets?
Yeah, totally. And I'll kind of also directly add on what Ross was saying, which this connects really into the philosophy that we have like globally, right? Which is that we believe that cybersecurity is becoming more and more heavily influenced by things like DevOps and infrastructure. There's just so much security, so much IT, so much infrastructure nowadays that we can't afford to, like as an industry, to only be building like widgets, right? That like, oh, this thing is able to do X very, very specifically and nothing else, only like those narrow parameters. Instead, we kind of take that really wide approach. And so to what Chris was saying, what we don't say as part of actually this feature is that the way we bring the data in, we've actually open sourced. So we call it the Universal Sensor Protocol, and we have a Golang client. And we get people that are building connections into a bunch of other things through that. It's just WebSocket over JSON. Again, we're not kind of locking things down, behind like 5 layers of bundle package you have to buy to get access to the doc. It's just this is it. This is there, and we just want people to have fun and do what they need to do their job. So. Yeah, I think it's pretty cool too.
Anything else we heard from customers? I know configuration complexity was something I heard a lot of talk about partway through the year.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this as the like token engineer here. Without going too deep into this, but yes. So LimaCharlie, right? Like the way we described it, there's a ton of different things you can do, right? Like bring in data, that's fine, but using Velociraptor or doing atomic red team and like historical hunting. There's just so many different kind of components that we have. Doing Yara signature, Yara scanning.
Yeah.
There's so many things in LimaCharlie that we kind of realized in the last year that we're not even close to being done. We're just starting. So there's one core thing that's not going to work out for us and for anybody in the long term, which is us building one-off APIs for all of the things, right? That's how you end up with just the sprawl. If you go to a vendor's website and they say, oh yes, we have APIs. Here's the page with the 250 different APIs, each one completely different than the other. Like if you're a dev, nobody likes that. So we decided to start with a new approach, which was that we said, look, there's configurations. Like fundamentally, so many of those things that I mentioned kind of rely on this concept of like, hey, there's a record, there's configuration records, and there's so many concerns that go along with that, right? Like I want to be able to enable and disable them or expire them or track them across the author, right? All of those common things that we kind of took a step back and said, okay, there's really a common a common configuration here, a common way of managing not all the things, but the vast majority of the things in LimaCharlie. And that's what we built. So you may or may not go through the docs and see references to Hive is sort of what we call it. But it's saying this idea that whether you're configuring a cloud-to-cloud adapter bringing in Office 365 audit logs, or you are configuring a detection rule that runs at wire speed on your EDR, those are really fundamentally kind of the same thing. The same, I want to apply configuration. And so we came up with this, and we've started porting a lot of the APIs that we had into this unified model. We're only getting started, but we already have something like 4 or 5 different ones. And the beauty is that as a user, what it actually means is way easier to configure and way faster delivery of new products, because we don't have to rebuild a new API every time, how do I enable, disable this? We can just reuse all of those components as we deliver the product. So, sorry, I mini rant. It's just, as a developer, I think it's going to have a huge impact in the long term.
It's a very important rant. I will say it's no. This I think I think this speaks again to kind of the behind the scenes complexities that folks who are out there who are kind of building security programs or are re-engineering or re-architecting security programs and stuff. These are issues that they're running into. Some of this may be abstracted away from you for kind of close your eyes and just take the alerts that we send you side of things. But when you're out there building and constructing a security program, or you're out there building and constructing something on top of LimaCharlie, these are all considerations that your developers come to the table with, right? They come to the table and say, hey, I'm used to managing my configuration options, my credentials a certain way. I'm used to doing this. I'm used to doing that. Or let me just make it easier, and Max just quote you again and just say, I'm used to kind of a simplified API approach of this, right? Or I would like to be used to a simplified API approach. And I think we kind of got, we took some of our earlier some of our earlier user, I'm not going to call them gripes, but I'm going to say observations, maybe is the better way to frame it, and said, you know what, let's forward think this. And we're going to start to find ways to offer kind of central managed and much better. I want to say much easier. I just want to say it's easier. And that's really the big takeaway for me when I view things like Hive and I view things like some of the other backend changes that we've made. It's just to make security and make management of a security platform easier for our users. Joe, you got something. You look like you're rearing to add something in there.
No, I was just excited about what you already said and what Max said. I think we made security posture portable. That's very important. I mean, and this is it's important from an individual as a professional. Is important as a company, because a company can acquire another company that may be working in another industry field, or a CTO maybe wants to move and they say, I did a lot of efforts. I want to translate all the effort I did in the last 2 years to my new company. So it's just something as a code. So we made it possible to transform all this effort in something that is stored, is tangible, and is portable. I think this is kind of magic, and I love this. As a security professional and as part of the team. So that's great. Just thank you, Matt. I wanted just to add this.
It's interesting. It's interesting how the approach to the way you build things changes once you are starting to think about building the internet level security infrastructure versus hey, okay, here is this security tool. You come into the web UI. Here is the button you have to click, and then it's going to spit out a couple of things for you to go through and manually decide, is this something worth paying attention or no? It's just it's that is in my mind what we talk about when we talk about the engineering approach to cybersecurity. It's like for some people on the call, whenever they hear a conversation, whenever they look at the title of the event, and it talks about the 2022 recap, and here we are talking about the specific APIs. But that's really the nature of it. It's like, hey, like you have to think forward. You have to think, what is the industry going to look like 10, 20 years from now? And like in that, like in the 10 years time frame, like it is very unlikely that in every single company's environment there will be 600 different tools all stitched together, simply because that is an approach that cannot scale. And the more this is really this, like, what is it? Is this the second law of the thermodynamics, where talking about really the expanding complexity? Like, I feel that's what it is. I don't know. I'm not smart, but really the idea is that the complexity is only going to increase. And because the complexity is only going to increase, the environments are only going to get more and more complex. And in those sort of conditions, like, you need to have the ability to control your security posture in a way that it makes sense to you, and not in the way that, hey, like this great vendor decided to build something that applies to all of their customers, and it is still like, it's still going to be a baseline in the same way as we think about the antivirus today. It is still important. It is just not enough.
Ross, if I can add something, just was inspired from, as usual, from what you say. But you know, we are in a world where also insurance companies are giving up. They say there are too many attacks. There are things that are happening, and it's not possible to contain this thing. But we wanted to give to the users the tool to understand what's going on, like just giving them a reason to say this is good, this is bad. And I think also our offer in terms of let's say retention capabilities, not just detection response, that is a bit like user agnostic, but the things we do is a way, hey, try to record your history, and let's look together into this, and we can try to solve the problem if there is one. That's fantastic. You don't have just to listen to the news and say there are so many attacks that we cannot maybe understand how things are happening. We are trying to have a kind of really rational approach to cybersecurity with facts. We think that we can record and think we can show and reply in our platform. That's amazing.
So basically, let's not take the conversation into this like, oh my God, the number of breaches last year, the number of cyber attacks, the ransomware is on the rise, insurance premiums are going upwards.
No,
here is how we save you.
You're right. Just cutting a bit of recent history, but there are many huge pillars of business are giving up. We are not. We are just giving the tools for making things like easier and like try to make our efforts like valuable for our customers. That's it.
I know a popular theme in 2022 we heard from our customers, which I think is going to be even more important in 2023 and beyond, is reducing costs. I know we added some features this year that help people dramatically reduce their costs associated with some tooling. Does anybody want to speak to that?
Yes, absolutely. There's one very important one that speaks to the heart of what any SOC team, security analyst, security engineer, anything like that should be looking for. And I spend a lot of time talking to our users about this, and I'm glad I get to have this stage to do it too. It's our replay functionality. I don't think I can clarify enough for folks just how many improvements have been made behind the scenes for that, but then also like what its capability is. So when I think of cost savings, there's multiple avenues we can go down, right? We can talk about just simple level pricing. We can talk about storage per whatever for whatever. And there's all sorts of numbers, Chris, we could go after. We could pull up the pricing calculator and say, hey, we're so transparent, you can go and map it all right now. But the other side of cost savings, I think, are just the like, does this investment or this thing that I did actually have an ROI on it that I might be able to get use out of? And for me, that's replay in a nutshell. So for anyone who's unfamiliar, replay is the ability to bring a detection and response rule to LimaCharlie and replay it, hence the name, against historical data sets and that kind of stuff. What I love about this feature set is you can dry run and see, all right, what's this going to cost me, right? Second, you can test detections against your own data. And I'm a firm believer that anyone who deploys any sort of security tooling whatsoever, there's no security tool in the world that is install and forget it, right? There's no set it and forget it out here. There is, you get a basic starting table stakes area. Everyone has the same out of the box. How you configure it, how you expand upon it, how you customize it is how you make it towards your niche environment. And detection and response rules are one of the fastest ways to take a off the shelf to a this is mine, or this is ours now, this is our organization. But the problem is a lot of folks get in and they kind of turn on all the detections. My old go-to story was also you download the snort rules, emerging threats, snort rules, turn them all on and just sit back and wait and hope there's the malware right there. Doesn't work that way ever. Detection and response rules are like little kids. They need to be nurtured, honed, tuned, sometimes changed, sometimes ignored. I didn't say that out loud, but sometimes, they've got to be modified to say, you know what, RDP is normal in my environment. So we've got to know that, right? We've got to accept that thing. But to be able to implement a detection and response rule and then use our replay feature and say, just how prevalent is this thing in my environment, right? Just how much of this is in there? Meaning if I turn on this rule, how crazy are things going to be, right? So cost wise, okay, you're running queries and there's, some costs associated with that. But let's go the other way. Let's talk about security analysts. Let's talk about your SOC, who normally would have to spend days, weeks running down all these false positives to get to an eventual state and say, hey, team, this is not false positives. This is our baseline, right? So now with a lot of the stuff that we've got built in, especially this one feature, I think you can baseline an organization for like pennies, and you can quickly come back and be like, okay, this is normal for us. This is abnormal. This is maybe questionable. And then I'll go a step further. Anything in the abnormal, priority 1. No questions asked. I tested it against all of our data. I know the fidelity of this detection, not because some random tweet told me, right? But because I ran it against my organization for the past whatever. I know the prevalence. I know the frequency. I know the fidelity. I can write playbooks off of true positive findings. My team is guided by much higher fidelity findings as opposed to, well, maybe it's bad. I'm not really too sure. So Chris, I can go on all day. I'll stop there. But in kind of summary there, for me, the ability to and this is one thing I love about what we did with this is it's like we offer our customers a year of data retention. To a lot of folks, that just means, cool, I'll check a compliance box. We have 365 days of retention. Well, no, we went a step further and why don't we let you make use of that data as well and run against it historically and do it for pennies, and boom, you're good to go. So that's one of my favorite ones. But I also, like I said, I extend that to security analysts not having to spend days running down stuff. And there's a huge savings there, huge savings.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I wasn't actually the one I was looking for, which is better. Yeah. Does anybody else can think of something that we did this year that helped reduce costs for our customers?
That would match Chris's expectation, which he is not going to tell us what it is.
I bet I know. So it's one of the things that we've done, and I think it was kind of more low key in the year, but for some people has a really big impact, is around data routing. So like Matt said, okay, it's a baseline in LimaCharlie in a sense that all of my data from all of my sources is retained for a year, and it's it's super cheap, right? We made it very, very cheap, and so okay, that's the baseline. It's a baseline that I can run, detection on the data coming in real time. Fine. It's a baseline that I can go and run these things, historical, do replay. Fine. But sometimes I want to be able to take parts of the data and bring it to the relevant places in my organization, right? Our engineering approach means that we're not pretending that we're the silver bullet for every possible use case on earth for cybersecurity. Instead, we make it really, and we've always made it really easy for you to say well, okay, all of the DNS events from like my Defender logs. I want to send them to like my Splunk or my BigQuery or whatever it is. So we always made that super easy. What we've done in the last year that's been kind of different is that we kind of dialed it up to 11, where we said like, hey, we're in a really cool spot to be able to not just like send and forward the relevant data to the relevant places, but we can start to really filter or narrow it down, right? So that let's say that historically, and those are like actual user examples, like names have been withheld, but hey, we used to send all DNS data into an ELK instance there. And like, I don't know, we were spending like $5,000 a month on that. And we had to, because, either we dropped a ton of the data or we send all of the data from like, from Defender or whatever source into there. And with LimaCharlie, we've been able to kind of change the way that you'd think about it and start to say, well, what do I actually need to make it into my ELK instance? Maybe I still want to have it in my ELK instance, but really what I care about is the host name, the timestamp, and the domain name. I don't care about anything else. And that's like, for some data sources, maybe that's 5% of the original traffic. And so we introduced a transforms so that people could start to say like, hey, I'm bringing in this Defender logs, but I really just care about this, and that field, and that one I want to anonymize. And that's what I want to send to a Lambda, right? Whatever it is. And so that's had a indirect huge effect on cost savings, because people were able to go and instead of like, taking the, like, I'm going to send everything at all times to that place or drop it, they were able to say, okay, I'm not going to lose anything. Here's what I actually need right now. I don't need to re-engineer, my like beat deployment on 5,000 servers. It's like, 2 clicks to be able to change that if I want. And then like things like sample rate and like all kinds of stuff that we realized we could input at that layer. And so I think that's had a pretty big impact on a lot of different users.
So basically, we have the ability to bring in, and that's what's cool about LimaCharlie, is we have the ability to bring in the data from literally any source, like whether we are talking about the endpoint agent, whether we are talking about the network browser, like the web browser telemetry, and so on, or like the external logs, GCP, CloudTrail logs, any other external telemetry. So all of that can come in. We have the ability to send the data to any external destination. Again, like no restrictions. But then I think what's rather interesting is, Max, like I'll probably put you on the spot, is the part that I'm personally excited about is, I mean, as much as I'm interested in what we've done, I mean, we did it. We have people, like, they use it, they love it. We'll get more people use it. The part that I'm interested in is, as we are looking into the new year, which we are already in, it's already been a couple of days into the new year. So I know the one thing that I'm excited about is the LCQL. And that's the, I don't know. I know this is a retroactive conversation, but if you were to kind of pivot a tiny bit and look into the future, I would love to have a quick chat about it as well.
We all are excited about it. It's just like the way our LimaCharlie should be. Max, please go.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal a quote from Matt because I really like it. Matt a couple of days ago, I think, said, we made it cheaper and now we're going to make it easier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of puts the right relief there. So yeah, all the standard, like, boilerplate of, all your data, like everything Ross said. And in a way, LCQL, so LCQL is the LimaCharlie query language. I know, I'm sorry, query language, it can't be helped. We tried to keep it as straightforward and close to, things like Splunk and ELK and those things as possible. But it's really an evolution, and I think it's kind of a testament to how we've built a lot of things. LCQL is essentially the ability to say, well, if I can run a replay job, with this detection rule over my historical data, why can't I just run an ad hoc query over my whole data set in LimaCharlie, where everything I have for the past year across everything is? Why can't I just type, show me the DNF from Windows Defender boxes that contains, evil.com, press enter and just get results, streaming in. And so that's what LimaCharlie query language is. So it's us taking access to a lot of the generic components that we've built and putting that out, delivering it. So I think it's I think it's going to be very cool.
Max, thank you. This was very humble. The things we have to say that we normalize all the data, so we can also ingest like things in kind of, I don't want to say binary format, seems a bit of jargon. I don't want to speak this kind of language. But the point is that now whatever you ingest in LimaCharlie is normalized. So in our data lake, you have the original file and you have the normalized file that can be parsed and is parsed, and you can use like to query it. So I think we are doing an effort that is like a translation effort. You can use your day-to-day language to query your data that usually they are not understandable, like not intelligible, but we do this effort to parse, to ingest through USB, to whatever, and then you can just really look into those data and you can create your own query, and then it's come back to you with a detection or whatever you want. That I think this bit of that touch of magic, right?
Yeah, and I'll add a bit of context to what Joe was mentioning, which is, that's actually another pretty kind of cool thing that we did as part of the USP. So all this telemetry in the last year, which is we didn't just say, hey, you can now bring Carbon Black, and it's a data set that looks completely different than everything else. And you have to like re-engineer all your detections so that they can work on, the LimaCharlie EDR and Carbon Black. We said sort of two things. One is you're not going to lose the original, so we encapsulate the original data always. And then the second one is, well, we know we can look through the Carbon Black data. We understand it. We can map it into the same EDR format as the LimaCharlie EDR and encapsulate the original, so that now if you're, let's say you're a really large company and you do acquisitions, you might acquire a new company that is on Carbon Black, and then the month after you acquire a different company that's on CrowdStrike. You don't need to re-engineer anything, because as a baseline, the EDR data, most of the EDR data just looks the same. So if you had detection rules, you can just keep applying those, at scale on all this data.
Okay, so I'm just getting a little conscious of time. I'm going to throw out my last fishing line here. We'll see if we can keep it moving. So one of the things we've heard time and again, and I think is a cornerstone of the philosophy that we operate with, is transparency in what our data looks like and how we operate. What are the things we did this year that increased visibility for our users?
I can start with this one. The biggest one, I think, is in our detection and response rule set, is the opening up of the Sigma rules. And this may sound kind of like, oh, didn't know you guys did that in the background. I'll just quickly summarize. There's multiple ways to write detections in LimaCharlie. I should say there's multiple ways to detect suspicious or malicious activity in LimaCharlie. We have our kind of native syntax, if you will, that you can use against events that come in from our various sensors. There's also, you can just with a click of a button turn on Sigma rule integration, which brings Sigma rules into the environment. And then Max mentioned earlier too, there's also like Yara scanning capabilities. So there's lots of different things that you can use to find
snap attack rules. We now have snap
attack
rules. We've got Soteria rule set. We've
expanding on some of the partnerships we've built too.
SOC Prime. So just like the shout out to all the amazing partners that we currently have, and to the ones that like may knock at our door tomorrow. Like we are an absolutely vendor neutral middleware, cybersecurity middleware provider, so anybody can go. Sorry, Matt.
No. It's important to note.
Like, I couldn't.
The three I mentioned, I won't call them I won't call them non-proprietary, if you will, but I'm going to call them non-branded necessarily. But then everything else that Ross mentioned too, SnapAttack, Soteria, Sock Prime, all the other integrations and partnerships we have, that's like leveling up even more, you know, because it's one thing to say I have Sigma, and then it's another thing to say I have our Soteria rule set, which is a curated rule set that actual, you know, analysts have potentially worked on, and they publish that for our users to use. But the issue with that is there's so many, and Ross, you made it, you added on to the point, which is there's so many different sources that we could bring in. That technically someone could go launch and someone could go install LimaCharlie right now, turn all the things on, and would probably have thousands of alerts a day. And who knows what is coming in there, but a lot of it may or may not be just kind of normal system noise. And some of it may just be malicious activity, and you need to go, you know, get some help. But nonetheless, what we did is in the detection and response rule space, we opened up the Sigma metadata that comes in, the Sigma metadata, the rule information, you know, a lot of the stuff that some folks would expect to see in kind of like the deeper parts of a SIM detection. If you were looking at it in another platform, that's now front and center in our detections window as well. So it gives your analysts, for anyone looking at that detections window, whether you're pulling API or in the app, the web app itself, it gives you the ability to see, oh, okay, what was the context behind this? What was detected? Are there any MITRE attack tags with this? Is there a reference I can go to? Are there attack groups associated, so on and so forth? And it's, you know, just another way that we kind of expose what's happening behind the scenes to our users and give them insight into what's actually generating detections in their environment.
Awesome. Yeah, and I like one of the things that I get, I'm probably like the least security person here technically, or at least like technically like the least technical security person. But like
neither are true. Don't let him fool you.
Well, but like it is my understanding that no matter what kind of behavior you're looking to detect, there are always many ways of doing it. And when Matt says like we made the metadata open, well, I can add on top of it like the whole rule content is open and it's visible and it can be tweaked, it can be adjusted. So it's not simply like, hey, you know, I've just got a bunch of like Sigma rules and I apply them to my tenant. It's like, no, you got a bunch of Sigma rules which you can then go and look at every one of them. Like, hey, how are we detecting this thing? Is there something that we need to tweak for our specific environment? Like maybe this rule is not applicable at all. Maybe we need to add like layer on some additional logic to reduce the amount of false positives. So it's all of that. Like when we say visibility, what we truly mean is like in this, like from the philosophical standpoint is you don't have to wait for the detection to show up for you to understand what your coverage is. Like by default, and this is something that I'm personally incredibly excited when I talk about LimaCharlie, is like by default, like we don't promise to keep anybody safe. We don't promise to stop like 100% 0 days APTs, breaches, ransomware. Like that is not the and like it's not the ball into anybody's court. It's just like not the approach we are taking. Instead, we are saying, hey, here are the tools for you to be able to do your job. And so, as a security professional who understands the business, which I believe is critical for anybody working in security, like when you know your business, when you know what behaviors are like good or bad in your specific environment, you can go and you can see your full rule set coverage, like all of your detections and response logic. You can double click on each and every one of the rules, adjust it. You can add the rules on top of the basic coverage. So like that's, in my mind, is the superpower of the transparency, is that you don't have to wait. Like frankly, like these days, more and more vendors are starting to add like the additional context into their detection. So yeah, like when detections happen, like in many other products, soon, probably in the next couple of years, like many more people will be able to see more context as to why it happened. But what they won't be able to do is to say, what am I covered against? How do I prove it? Like that's what the visibility is about. Yeah.
Ross. I absolutely agree 100%. And I think we are doing a very difficult job. We are trying to reduce noise. This is the most important things. Reduce noise is reducing cost, reduce human efforts. So that's exactly what you described, because we are pleased to have a great open source community working with us. You know, there are people like trying to write detection rules, ERA rules, whatever. But the point is that we can give them the tool to do fine tuning and tailor, something around the organization. So that's the magic. Again, I use it 2 times the word in this webinar, but I really think that's something amazing. And yeah, it's perfectly matched what you already described, Ross. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, I think that's a pretty great summary of the most substantial pieces that we worked on this year. And having reviewed those and knowing that we're getting close to time, I think it's only makes sense for us to pontificate on what is coming. How are we expanding our approach in 2023, and what do we want to focus on?
Transparency. I'll go first, I guess, since I'm the first one who spoke. No, I think transparency is an important one. I'll continue. I think it's been one of the underlying themes of this year in review that we've been doing has been giving our users access to their data, period. That's it. It shouldn't be some super long, complex statement with a bunch of caveats or bullet points below it or anything like that. The best security decisions can be made with the most available data. And I think we're definitely on a goal to make sure we don't kind of abstract or hide that from any of our users as well. So I'll pick on the line, Chris, of transparency and just say, these types of discussions about ways to tune things to your environment and integrate data sources and see everything in one place and treat them as first-class objects and things like that. You're going to continue to see that out of us as well. It's one of our, kind of guiding principles. So I'm gonna pick that one and hope that I'm right. And in a year from now, I'll say I told you.
Yeah, I think you are. I will say normalization. So just putting the data at the same level and make it open and accessible to everyone. That's my 2 coins.
And I'll just go and I will say that instead of continuing this pattern of naming one word, I'll specifically call out that about somewhere between 6 months ago, well, definitely in 2022, so it technically kind of fits into the theme of this conversation. I think there is somewhere on the LimaCharlie side, there is an article I wrote about the reasons why LimaCharlie exists, and transparency is one of them. So for me, it's transparency, control, innovation, and something else. Oh my god, and scale. And so obviously, scale and like Matt has mentioned, transparency. The one piece that I would like to just double click on is the control. It's the ability for anybody, it's the ability for a security professional to control their own security coverage, to control their own security posture. And I'm a big believer that the future of cybersecurity is not going to be it's not going to be built by a couple of vendors just coming in and magically solving all the problems. There will obviously be the basic layers of coverage, but at the end of the day, especially for organizations that have a lot to lose, the access to talent is going to be critical. And it's the people who will be working in those companies trying to secure them. Those are the kind of people who will need to have the ability to transparently see what is my security coverage, not just the data. The data is a big part of it, but also what am I doing about that data? Not what is my vendor doing, but what am I as a security professional in charge of securing the company X? What am I doing? How am I detecting specific behaviors? What is it out there? To me, I see whenever I talk to people in the industry, I see more and more security people, security engineers, detections engineers, just explaining their workflow by saying that, hey, I start my day, I read a bunch of news, I see exactly, what popped up, and then I try to I look at those behaviors, I try to understand what would it mean to detect it in my environment? I write a rule. I test the rule. That's something that we enable people to do. So transparency, control, and doing it all at scale, and making it easier for people to innovate. So when I think about the innovation, again, it's not one of those BS terms. Yeah, cool, we do it. What I think about is, hey, somebody I know we are not currently at the point when we can talk about a bunch of the stuff publicly, but there are a bunch of our customers who come in and say, hey, I want to build on top of LimaCharlie. I want to build my own product and I want to deliver it to my customers as my own solution. I would like to just use your agent, to collect the telemetry, or like I would like to use your rules engine to do something else. So it's all of that stuff. So when I say innovation, what I really mean is like, what does it take for somebody to build the future of cybersecurity, to build like the new products that are needed without having to reinvent the whole infrastructure and build it all from the ground up.
Yeah, it's very well said, Ross, and it's almost the innovation of our users as well, right? It's saying that we want to be the catalyst to help, and I think that's probably common to all of us, that like one of the things that we like the most is to talk to some users that describe how they're using LimaCharlie, and we just go like, wait, what? Like, oh yeah, yes, yeah, you can totally do that. We just never thought about it, but because we, things are generic, like you can do really cool.
And that's what's exciting, but also like that's what's hell hard about what we do. Like it's just like it would have been so much easier to, whenever somebody approaches you and asks like, hey, like what does LimaCharlie do? It's so much easier when you can say, hey, well, we are an XDR, we are an EDR, we are a SOAR, we are a SIEM, or like any of the other like 655 different. I don't know if that is. I think 655 is exactly. But it's hard to put what we do into a box, and it's much easier to show, just to explain what we do when we see the use case. When somebody comes in and says, "Hey, like I'm building this thing. Like I would like to just collect the events and send it into the place where I'm going to apply some machine learning algorithms. Like I don't want to build an agent. Like that's not where my business is like that's not the part of what where I add value. Like I'm really good at like analyzing data. Can you help me?" It's like, yeah. Just like use the agent. You don't need to pay us to even store the data. Just use the agent, funnel the data into the output that you need, and do whatever you do, like in some other source. Like that's the stuff that to me is cool. It's being this middleware of cybersecurity, being this middle layer where we just give people the pipes. It's up to them to do what makes sense to them.
And I will say, as my answer, connecting very directly to that, I think what you guys have said is great. So I'm looking for like the thing that we'll add here, and I think it's to keep doing one of the things that we've been doing, which is to talk with our users, figure out things that are a pain for them. Right. I don't mean that like at a super high level, like, value proposition. I really mean like, hey, we have to maintain these two boxes that do this thing in our infrastructure because we need to look for X. And the story of LimaCharlie is for us to have those conversations, take them back internally to LimaCharlie, take a step back and look at a generic perspective, at a large scale perspective. Is there a mechanism that we can build that will allow that one user, but also, 50 other use cases we never even thought about, to go and leverage LimaCharlie so they don't need to maintain that infrastructure. They don't need to do all of these kind of, painful points. And we can just make people's lives easier. And I think there's so much that we do already, but there's also so much that we can keep doing. So I think that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. So basically... basically, Chris, I know you asked about the plans for the new year. Like, no specific feature commitments will be mentioned to this call. I will not allow this to happen. I will just say that the overarching theme is we are working towards many exciting developments, and we'll be introducing them as they become available. Please.
Okay, so we're down to like a minute and a half, so I'm just going to try and squeak in the last things that I wanted to cover here. One thing we did in 2022 that we hadn't done yet was we started going to conferences. Our company was started right before the pandemic, and once we started getting ramped up, it was lockdown, so we never got to meet a lot of the customers and people we work with. So that was super awesome about 2022. The face-to-face time with people is super important. And we're going to be going to a bunch of conferences in 2023. We're at ShmooCon, B-Side San Francisco, RSA, ThoughtCon, Blue Team Con. I think we're going to be at Black Hat as well. So if you're watching this and you want to hang out, let us buy you a beer or whatever, please reach out. You can get any of us on LinkedIn or our community Slack, which is linked at the bottom of our website. We're on Twitter. We're on Mastodon at LimaCharlie.io, at infosec.exchange. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to see you in person. And I think that's pretty much it, because we got about 30 seconds left. So if you made it this far, thanks so much for joining us. If we didn't get to your question, we will follow up via email after this. The conversation just went longer than we thought. So
thanks for keeping us organized, Chris.
Yeah, no
Thank you,
problem.
Chris.
Thank you,
Well
Chris.
done.
Yeah, those few seconds to say thank you very much. You're great. Great.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.